Everybody, we made it to the end of Star Trek Enterprise. Here we are. We're going to do a season 4 wrap-up and then a series wrap-up, all mixed into one super special podcast. Clay, how are you?
Good. This is going to be harder for me than the trivia game to remember everything that's happened in this series.
The problem, this is somewhat tangential to that, but the problem with these wrap-ups is that I kind of feel like the wrap-up should be similar to how I would change the Oscars, which is that you give the best picture for 5 years ago. You don't do the current year because it's too fresh. You have to give a little time for things to settle down. So you give them 5 years, and then you do that. The series wrap-ups and the season wrap-ups are always tough right when we get to the end of it, because kind of like how we were discussing in our Patreon special for Pegasus before the finale came out, your opinion changes with the series as time goes on. Like you look back, you go, oh, I never really noticed that as new eyes. But we're going to try to do our best with Enterprise here, which we just finished. We started this 2+ years ago, Clay, covering Enterprise.
Wow. And
as a special feather in your cap, this is the first Star Trek series that we can say you've seen every episode. You might have seen all the other episodes, but this is the first one I can prove definitively you've seen them.
If there was one to pick, this would be it. To have the working knowledge of Star Trek Enterprise that I do now is frankly something I look forward to coming in handy.
You're going to start
from here on out.
You're going to start editing the Wikipedia and stuff, like making sure that it's all right, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Yes. Well, it'll be difficult because half the character names, I'll be like, I don't know who those people are.
Soval. Who's that? Who's that guy? All right. Let's start off with season 4, I guess, because we just finished it. It's fresh in our minds. We did wrap-ups for all the other series, so we might as well do this one too. The first thing to talk about this one, I think, there's two major points of season 4, I think. I think that there's the way that they did the episodes, which is these mini arc things. And then there's the amount of fan service that went into the season as a whole. I think those are the two like definitive aspects of season 4 of Enterprise. Mm-hmm. Do you want to start with either of those? Or I guess this would be a good way to broach into it. Is season 4 the best season of Enterprise?
I don't know. That's a tough question to answer, honestly. I want to say yes, because I feel like the two-parters, weirdly enough, brought some sort of consistency to the season that the other ones didn't have. Like they kind of knew what they were doing more. But I don't know if I can say that like it had the highest number of good episodes. Do you have the numbers in front of you? Is there a comparative we can look at? You
thought season 3 was a little bit better than season 4. So
well, there we go.
Your ratings
numbers speak for themselves.
You gave it a 2.68 for season 1, 2.73 for season 2, virtually identical. Season 3, you have a 3.13, which is a big jump from our 5-point scale. It's a pretty significant jump. And then you went down to a 3 for season 4. So season 3 is slightly higher. I'm exactly the same as you. Season 1, 2.64. Season 2, 2.73. Up to 2.83. I'm not quite as high on you as season 3. But then I'm down to 2.7 for season 4. And I was trying to think about that, whether or not that makes sense. But go ahead, whatever you think.
Well, I think what it is, if I remember correctly, is that season 3 felt like they were moving towards something, whereas season 4 really doesn't feel that way. And so I think there was a much bigger upside for potential in what they were doing that varied episode to episode. So I think there were probably some episodes where we were like, oh, okay, this is really good. There's a lot of potential here, which they never followed up on or something like that. Whereas season 4 does have a couple more interesting ideas, I guess, but I can't necessarily say the episodes are any better.
Yeah. Do you need a refresher on how few stories are in this season? The outside of the
it's only like 4, right? 4
outside
or 5?
of the couple of standalone episodes like Observer Effect, Bound, Home, there is the Augment arc with Brent Spiner, the Vulcan arc, the Romulan Interference arc, the Klingon Augment arc, the Mirror Universe, and then Terra Prime. Those are the 6 stories that happened in this season.
That's not including the standalones.
Not including the standalones. There's like 3 or 4 standalone episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were listing those off, none of them really made me go, ooh, yeah, those ones.
That's the problem with it.
But to be fair, I mean, it's tough because I don't know if you could do that with anything in this series, frankly. If you were to say, remember the one where this happened, I go, yep, I certainly have a hard record that says I watched it.
There's a number on a spreadsheet. You did. I know. Is that like, I guess that's for the bigger, broader Enterprise discussion. I think that I was pretty underwhelmed by the mini arc thing. Like after a certain while, it felt to me, and I think I mentioned this on a podcast before, that it felt more like it was a budget decision than a creative decision, where they were sort of mandated that they had to reuse these sets that they had because it cost too much money to build new sets for every single episode. A lot of them also just followed the general Enterprise thing of the third episode was always some action sequence letdown thing when it's stretched out to an entire episode, you start getting pretty tired of that. I can deal with it for 5 minutes at the end of an Enterprise episode, but when it's the entire 42 minutes of a 3-episode arc, it kind of wears on me a little bit. I don't think any of them are particularly interesting. I think that the Klingon augments might still be my favorite of them. Terra Prime was terrible. I thought the Vulcan arc was terrible.
Prime, more like Terra Bull.
Terrible Prime. And what's the Romulan Interference one? I think is the most forgettable. When I was looking at the episode titles, I had to remember what to call that one, and I guess it's Romulan Interference.
Even though you had listed them off that way, that didn't even click in my brain as to what that was about until just now. Like, oh yeah, that's the one where they get the little
the Daft Punk pilot,
Edgar Winter guy, the Edgar Winter.
The Andorian, the Enar or whatever they are.
Yeah. You know, I think the potential of those stories is pretty high. I think like going into those stories, I was more hopeful that they were going to live out, because I feel like they all start fairly strong.
Yeah.
You know, you got the killing of the Admiral, the blowing up of Starfleet headquarters. I
think some of them have strong middles too. Like the Augment arc is Cold Station 12, which we liked quite a bit. The Klingon Augment arc starts pretty well.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah. So there are examples of that, but I think they uniformly finish underwhelmingly. In Terra Prime being a terrible episode, and the rest of them not really amounting to much.
Yeah, it's difficult because they're telling one big story over 3 episodes, but it doesn't really feel like they thought that far ahead with them. It just kind of seems like they wrote the same way they always write, except they had 3 episodes that were in the same world instead of just one.
Yeah.
So they write one, and without really thinking about what's going to go into the next 2, they do the next one, and they're still flying by the seat of their pants, which, I mean, I guess is the nature of episodic television or television in general. But yeah, it's too bad, because I do think that there were some cool ideas in there that were not capitalized on or really explored in a really satisfying way, because, Mayweather's got to have a secret girlfriend from the CIA or something instead.
Yeah. I find them...
We got to find out what happened to the bumps, Wes. We got to know.
Well, you figured it out in this one. Did the season go by quick for you compared to the other ones? It's much fewer. It's many fewer episodes than the other ones.
I would say yes, because I mean, I think we went through it faster than we have either of the other 3 seasons, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
It's 4 or 5 episodes shorter than the other seasons. I think that it's even more in season 2, obviously. Yeah, so it's like 6 episodes shorter than seasons 1 and 2. The arcs, there's so few of them. There's only a handful of them. I felt like it went by pretty quickly. But I guess my overriding larger point as to where season 4 sits in is that it's one of these things like we always run into when we're about to get into something. The listeners will get sort of fired up about the change that's going to happen when you change into a new season. I feel the same. I'm like, oh, a new season is going to be a whole new different thing. And season 4 is always kind of heralded as the best episode of Enterprise and also the only good season of Enterprise. And I don't think it is. Like I think I personally like season 3 better, even though season 3 was probably less good objectively. I feel that season 3 was Enterprise trying to move the show in a direction that is a little bit more modern, and it wasn't sure how to do that, and it didn't really have a good idea about what a 24 episode arc was going to be with the Xindi, but it still kind of felt like something. And the episode, what are those ones? The ones at the end of season 3, they had a trilogy themselves: the Zadi Prime, Damage, and the Forgotten. So that's when they arrive at Azadi Prime, which is the Xindi base. Then the ship gets blown to shit and everything's damaged. And then there's the Forgotten, which is one of those Trip's sister died things, and he has like his emotional flashback. I would argue that trilogy is better than anything that happens in season 4. I think because it built to it better in that season, even relatively speaking. Anyway, I don't know. It comes into, I guess, the fan servicey aspect of it, which is something that we talked about before, which is that season 4 really embraces it. It says, this is the season we're going to explain all the things. We're going to explain the bumps. And I think I just come back to my point that we made somewhere in the Klingon arc, which is that this is some kind of inflection point in the franchise, really. This is where everything started to turn, and Manny Koto and the writers of season 4 might not have been aware of the Pandora's box that they were opening, because it's not unique to Star Trek, but I think that they did something here which forever changed the franchise and made it seem even smaller in a weird way, because Enterprise is a prequel, and the whole time you would have thought it would have been building towards that, but they didn't do that early. It was only really season 4 that started to go heavy on that stuff.
Well, what's interesting about the choice is, like, now it feels like, why do you do a prequel if not to tie it into the things you know, right? Like, that's just how people do this stuff now. But with this show, what they did it fairly smartly, where they went back far enough where they could have a little bit more leg room as to what they could and couldn't do. Excuse me. And I think that was conceptually the best way to do it. Because I think on paper, the idea is still very strong, where it's like, okay, we've seen 2 different Enterprises, we've seen Deep Space Nine, we've seen the Voyager, we've seen everything moving forward, but what about going back and seeing what the first version of this was, the first time that humans boarded a ship called the Enterprise and went out exploring? I think that's a fairly solid premise, even though you're still trading on the nostalgia of the ship to a certain extent. And what they managed to do, I think, was avoid canon problems for a solid amount of time, more or less. Like, they had a couple instances where they kind of had to really hand wave some stuff where it's like, well, we never asked them what they were called, so we don't realize that they were called Ferengi. You know, it's like, okay, sure. But generally, they had enough time in between their show and the what we're generally used to, that they gave themselves room to play around, which is why I found it that much more fascinating that in season 4 they were like, all right, let's just start tying things together.
Yeah, because
it seems like with this show you didn't have to do that. I think where this idea has gone sideways a bit is not so much just because it's not the prequel in and of itself that's the problem. It's that the point in time that they choose to set the shows or set the movies or whatever. Like, then you start navel gazing about stuff that people recognize, whether it's rebooting the movies or Discovery, which is a prequel sort of, but it's only a prequel by like 25 years or something. So it's like close enough that if we get into a pinch, if season 1 doesn't work so well, we can have the Enterprise show up and everyone will just start clapping.
Yep.
Which, I mean, that worked. It worked on me. So
it worked.
Who am I to
effective.
complain? But you know what I mean? Like they kind of ended up in this weird place where they had enough space where they could do stuff without really having to deal with established canon. However, once they started tying stuff together, it made the links that much more tenuous because they had to reach so far for that stuff, you know?
Yep.
So it ended up in a really weird place where they're trying to do this fan servicey stuff, which is kind of bogging the show down in the final season. But I think the thing that's really bogging it down is that it feels so much like a let's just do this to do this kind of thing, because the setting of the show is not conducive to tying up certain elements that they're choosing to tie up.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with what Enterprise did in season 4 is that it's the setting of it just doesn't feel grandiose enough to reflect what is supposed to be going on at this point. Like it's something that's kind of unique about like Deep Space Nine's stationary aspect is something that feels more well suited for that. Like the fact that the Enterprise can just kind of like flit around in space and go to different places, and people meet in the conference room of the Enterprise, and it's this tiny thing, and it's supposed to be this galactic coming together and all that stuff. There's something about the fact that it can just move around that makes it feel very empty and very small. And it makes all the stuff that happens on it feel inconsequential and small at the same time, because it's too, like, I think that the way that it would have been interesting, I guess, is that like if you had a Star Trek show that was for some reason entirely set on Earth during this time. Like, I think that that's where you could actually get into what this show is trying to do at the fourth season when it's trying to connect stuff, because I feel like you'd have a better sense of what Earth is doing at that point. It wouldn't just be the Enterprise as the representative of Earth. You'd have a sense of the aliens on Earth. You could play up this xenophobia aspect. Like there's stuff there that can work within it. And the season 4 Enterprise stuff felt more like memory alpha connections than it did legitimate world building exercises, where it was just trying to broach off into the bigger franchise rather than be its own thing and like have Enterprise be meaningful in any kind of a way.
Well, you know, I think one of the big problems is one of the things they're driving towards in this whole series is the formation of the Federation, right? Which is they kind of glance at in seasons 1 through 3. In season 4, they do more than glance at it, but not much more than glance at it. Whereas if they had set the entire fourth season in front of the backdrop of this is going to be about the, you know, the growing pains of birthing the Federation, like what is it? What does this actual coming together look like? What does it take? What does it cost? Then the stories they're telling that are more tied into canon have a little bit more weight to them and feel a little bit more in place, where it's like, okay, you're trying, like for instance, you're trying to bring together 3 different groups of aliens to form this alliance, right? Well, that gets a lot more difficult when all of a sudden your genetic engineered super soldier serum gets out to Kronos and they start growing super soldiers, and then you got to let this guy out of prison. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit more meat to that stuff if it's like this is all in front of the backdrop of tying together the knot that is the biggest knot in the franchise that no one has ever really tried to untangle.
Yeah. They were that's maybe as good a place as any also kind of awkwardly segue us into the
because you have to untangle a knot before you tie it up.
we'll segue into discussing the series as a whole, I guess, at this point.
Can I actually ask you a series-wide question?
Yeah.
I just because it's in my head, and we're talking about tying up stuff in canon and prequels and stuff like that. When we covered Discovery, one of the big things we talked about as being sort of like a really big ask was the Discovery ship itself and the spore drive, and how this is a revolutionary piece of technology that feels futuristic even for the most futuristic version of Star Trek to date, that just disappears and nobody ever talks about it again.
They promised not to talk about it, Clay. It's
right. Yes, they locked it. They locked it, Wes. They locked it. You can't.
It's the same thing that happened with the JFK assassination. Everyone who's in on it just decided not to tell anybody else what happened.
Right. Yeah. Now, would you find the Xindi attack on Earth to be something comparable to the Discovery spore drive? Because I feel like the Xindi's attack on Earth is a huge fucking deal. Mm-hmm. They killed 7 million people and almost started this gigantic intergalactic war, but it's obviously not something that ever gets talked about outside of
Enterprise.
My favorite former Mako, who goes on to turn into a monster in Star Trek Beyond. But how do you feel about that as far as those two things go?
No, the Xindi attack doesn't really bother me. It is a major thing, but it was... I thought what they did was appropriate, even though in and of itself it doesn't make a lot of sense, which is just that it kind of the probe came and it just strafed Miami, basically. It didn't destroy the moon. It didn't destroy a continent on Earth. It was kind of it was a big attack, but I think they properly balanced it where it's not something that people would unavoidably talk about in the future. I can see the other series never bringing up the Xindi attack. And I thought that worked. I feel that the spore drive is worse to me because the spore drive solves a problem for the entire setup of a later series in Voyager. Voyager doesn't have a problem if anyone had just talked about Discovery after it left. I know they agreed not to, they promised not to, but that's like a catastrophic impact on the other series in a way that I don't think the Xindi stuff is.
Yeah, it is kind of like the difference between knowing that there was the French and Indian War in the 1700s.
Yeah.
And finding out that the French had submachine guns, and then they just decided never to talk about the fact that they had submachine guns.
That would make me study the French and Indian War. As opposed to
I know,
just
right?
as the name of the war. Yeah, exactly. It is.
That's how if your
similar.
if your kids are having trouble with history, throw that in there and just see you'll get to it eventually. Someone will bring it up, right?
Have you? So you stopped reading about the war, Alistair? You didn't get to the part where the lightsabers were introduced in the sacking, the sacking of London or something like that. I think that
the hoverboard attack of 1701.
Series wrap up. At this point, we can get back into that stuff too. It'll all tie in. 98 episodes of Enterprise, Clay, we covered over the past 2+ years. Someone comes up to you in the next couple of days and says, Clay, I see that Star Trek Enterprise is on my Paramount Plus subscription. What have you ever seen that? And you go, yes, I've seen all 98 episodes. They go, oh, really? How would you sum up your feeling? How would you sum up Enterprise to me? Motivate me to watch this or don't motivate me to watch this. What's a pithy, concise way that you would sum up Star Trek Enterprise?
Well, first of all, I would say how frustrating that is that there's only 98 because I think isn't the syndication
100
barrier 100?
Yeah, it's very cool.
They couldn't have done 2 more. Get some royalties. Star Trek might have not been dead for the next 4 years if they had gotten more royalties out of the show.
It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder if that was still happening at that point, because I would have thought that whoever owned them would have said, we're 2 away, just give them 2 episodes and then we can syndicate this thing. Maybe the rules changed. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. What if someone asked me about Star Trek Enterprise, should I watch it? I would say...
Or just your pithy take on the series. How would you in a short, brief sentence log line, sum up Star Trek Enterprise for somebody.
Fine, but not essential.
Yeah. I would say it's a disinterested show, I think. I think that it is fine. On our ratings here, it's clearly at the bottom of our series so far, numerically, with our 5-point scale. It's below DS9, TNG, TOS, and then Enterprise comes in a distant fourth. I think what I'm going to think about this, like, besides just the incredible lack of interest that everyone involved in this series seems to have, it's also another thing that defines it for me is it's a very kick the can down the road series. I feel like one of its defining writing traits is, here's an idea. Does anyone want to do anything with it now? No, just kick it down the road. And someone will come up with a script down a year from now. The Temporal Cold War felt that way. Trippin' to Paul felt that way.
In retrospect, Temporal Cold War seems like something somebody woke up in the middle of the night and scribbled on a sticky note and then was like, you know what? That sounds good. I'm not really sure what that means. We'll get to it, but let's put it in and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And then they just never really got to it.
We're gonna insert Bob. We're gonna insert your Temporal Cold War scribble into season 1. You keep talking to your therapist about what that dream might have been about. I'm sure we'll figure it out by the time this is over. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a series that was never really interested in being about or discussing anything. It was always just like, here's a thing. There it goes. We'll go chase it for a little bit. The Andorian arc, I think the Vulcans fall into that trap. The Cold War and Trippin' to Paul are probably the most egregious examples of it. I think that the Xindi arc, mostly because the Xindi arc was so stretched out that they had to kick the can constantly down the road. It's a series that just never felt like it wanted to grab hold of the reins and actually be a show about something. It was always contentious to exist.
It's very workmanlike.
Yeah.
You know, it's the television franchise equivalent of being like a journeyman baseball player or something, you know?
Yes.
It's like, yeah, he's good. He's a solid hand to have on a team, but, you know, he was on a team that won the World Series one year.
Yeah. No one's talking about him. Yeah, outside of that, though, right?
Yeah, now he's on the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah. Yeah, it is that, right? I think that Enterprise is by far the most disappointing of the Star Trek series we've watched so far. It's the one I don't really ever see myself going back to watch any of this ever again for some reason. We have a few patrons who are going to comment about how this most recent rewatch has left them a little bit lacking, and I'm glad you're watching along with the show, but I could never rewatch this series. I don't think it just is not interesting to me in any way.
I think, you know, I hate just piling on here because, you know, some people it's their favorite series and that's totally fine. But it just never felt to me like it really got off the ground. It just kind of it's almost worse for me than something like Discovery, which I think is actively bad, because this one I don't think is generally actively bad. I just think it's fine.
Right. Yeah.
Which means that I find it generally unremarkable and unmemorable for me.
It's very uninteresting.
Whereas,
Discovery is interesting in how bad it is.
Yeah, and it even like it's Discovery, for all of its storytelling faults, is fairly interesting visually. Like there's stuff you can really talk about, or stuff that is kind of worth remembering, you know, as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas Enterprise just all feels very middle of the road to me.
Yeah. A very long road.
For better or worse too, you know, because I mean, like, that's what we were saying with all these episodes. Like they're not badly produced episodes. They're just unremarkable.
But I think that, like, so I can understand the comfort argument for it, right? Like I understand the sort of the white noise argument that could go along with this show. I do feel there's a difference. There's a white noise comfort I feel with TOS, TNG, Voyager, and DS9. Maybe Voyager less, but that Enterprise doesn't really have, because I never felt like I was going to expect big things from Enterprise. It's like it's relentless middle of the roadness, just wears you down in a way that it stops being interesting. Like the other series have greater peaks and valleys, I think, in terms of their consistency. It was like a bad episode, then there's a great episode, then there's an okay episode, then it kind of alternates and through that stuff. But I think that at least keeps your interest as you're watching it, because you never know really what you're going to get week to week. Enterprise was just, as we've been saying, just the definition of like a 2 all the way through. And it eventually, it loses that comfort appeal for me, because I don't turn it on and it doesn't bring me. I think a lot of the comfort aspect is that it has to make you feel comfortable as you're watching it. It's not just like the production itself. It's sort of like your relationship to the material. And Enterprise never got there for me.
Yeah, in my head, this is turning into a roast of Star Trek Enterprise, but I have like a very clear picture of all of these series that we've watched up to this point, like a visual, literal snapshot of what pops into my head when I think about them. Like TOS, I think about bright colors, very high chroma, 60s television, very splashy sci-fi stuff. TNG is like kind of like art, a little bit more subdued, but like flashy and more of kind of like a futuristic Art Deco kind of sense.
Sure.
Where you've got new colors introduced, but you've also managed to make all these uniforms uniform by adding the black to everything. Deep Space Nine is a much moodier show. It's darker. It's more darkly lit. The uniforms are darker. You get that gray going on in there. It's just a darker theme and everything. When I think about Enterprise, it's just like blue.
Gray.
It's just
steel blue.
Flat. It's like grayscale in my mind, because it's like blue uniforms, blue steel, not the Zoolander look, like actual blue steel. Structures. It's very like, and it just doesn't pop the way the other ones do in my mind. It just feels very low, no real contrast visually. Yeah. It's just kind of a middle, like the what's the thing? The histogram on that thing is just like a straight line.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, it's it doesn't grab me either, and I think it goes beyond production for me. This is like it does feel like I'm going to be ragging on the show, but I mean, like, I just do think it's clearly the worst Star Trek show we've covered to this point. Like, Discovery is worse, I think, but this is the most uninteresting Star Trek show that we've covered so far. Would I say that it's a better show than Discovery or Picard? It's hard to say, but
because even the low points of Enterprise don't hit the lows of, say, like your worst TOS episode, where there's still something so fucking wacky that you can talk about it for an hour.
Yes, yeah,
or like it makes it memorable. It's like at no point in Enterprise did they go to like a planet made only of tree people who also happen to have a copy of the American Constitution or something. It's like that should have been a goal in season. Should have been a goal in
season 4. Maybe Coda should have been like, give me some of the worst scripts that you guys have, and let's at least make this feel like a Star Trek show, and go in that direction. It's true. It's not. It did avoid bad stretches. Like, I think DS9 had bad stretches that are worse than some of Enterprise's stuff, but it's that the peaks and the valley thing is really what you remember off of this stuff. Do you
think? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off mid-question there, but do you think any of that kind of timidness to do something more memorable is kind of a result of it being sort of a prequel that has certain canonical restraints to it. Like they're trying to do this without rocking the boat too much, despite the fact that I said they kind of had the room to rock the boat a little bit more.
Yeah. No, I don't. Did you ever feel that the series was bumping into canon too much? I never felt like. I always felt that this show, because of how lonely space is at this point and how empty and how devoid of like the Federation and stuff there is, I always felt that you could just get away with sort of strange stuff in the show, like bumping into things that you'd never have to explain again.
Yeah.
Because I never felt that this show is that constrained by the canon restrictions on it. As you were saying, it's fairly a distant memory from TOS, and there's just space to play in. Like TOS ran into like space gods, literal like Apollo Greek space gods, and no one ever talked about that afterwards. I think Enterprise could have gotten away with the same thing.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe I'm not giving it enough credit, because the temporal Cold War is a pretty out there concept.
Yeah.
They took a big swing right out of the gate. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a foul tip.
Yeah. It was
a lot of baseball metaphors in this episode. I've got nothing
in
else
the dead
to
of
grab
winter.
onto.
You're fiending for some baseball, and the sweet science. That's boxing. What's the nickname?
I mean, maybe
baseball,
if Enterprise was a sport, it would be baseball, because it's like, I enjoy the teams, but it's kind of boring to watch unless you're hammered.
Yeah, but when
that's how I would describe Enterprise.
When someone asks you your pithy thoughts about Enterprise, you say you should watch some baseball. Instead, just get the MLB network and just watch baseball nonstop.
Get a bag of shelled peanuts in the shell, a $15 beer, a wet, soggy hot dog, and just watch some Enterprise.
Speaking of wet, soggy hot dogs, is this the worst cast? Worst group of characters in Star Trek? Is there a worse crew? And again, I don't think this crew is terrible. This crew is just unmemorable to me. I was thinking, if I were to do a fantasy draft for the like positions of a ship where you had to have a captain, engineer, doctor, I don't think any of these are. I'm not upset if anyone grabs any of these characters. Maybe Trip, I was thinking, because the engineer group is weirdly weak across the series. Trip might be a dark horse where I'd be like, I respect that pick that you picked Connor Trinneer's Trip as your engineer, but Archer, T'Pol, Phlox, Reed, Hoshi, Mayweather, I'm not picking any of those guys anywhere near the top of any of the series.
I wouldn't be disappointed to have Phlox on my team.
As your doctor
he's a pretty good character. Yeah.
Oh, I think the doctors are so stacked. And I'm thinking only of the metaphor here. But the doctor is like a stacked position in Star Trek, I think.
Yeah, it really is. But I think with that in mind, I think Phlox fits into that grouping.
Okay.
Where, excuse me, where like if I was really, really gunning for front left pilot or whatever that position is, and I
Chekhov seat,
and I couldn't get Chekhov, and I couldn't get whatever extra was sitting there that week on TNG, and I got stuck with Mayweather, I'd be like, ugh.
We lost the season, guys. It's over. Trade him away.
But Phlox is probably, I would say Phlox and Trip probably are the only two. Would I actively?
Here's my counter to Phlox. I'm interested in your Phlox thing, because I feel Phlox started out really strong, but eventually faded into nothing after a couple seasons.
Sure.
Would you'd agree with that? Like I think that out of the gate he was probably the best defined character of all of them. Mm-hmm. But they stopped using him, I think, outside of scenes where they had someone come into sickbay and he's the doctor who was there for it, which is, it's the way a lot of those characters are. But I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, I think like I was saying, like I don't know, he wouldn't be my first choice, but I don't think I would be disappointed to have him because I do think he's a fairly interesting character with some stuff to play around with. That he does kind of fall into the background, but I think when they choose to use him, he's very effective. I think he's a good kind of bench guy to have. And engineer is interesting because like would I actively Sorry, I'm coughing all over the place today. Would I actively choose Trip over Geordi, Scotty?
I'm yes to both of those.
I don't know who the engineer is.
So it would be Torres and
on,
Voyager. It would be Miles O'Brien
I don't know
DS9.
Torres yet. O'Brien. I think I find O'Brien to be a more interesting character, but I can see why you would choose Trip over O'Brien.
Yeah, I think I'd choose Trip over O'Brien. Again, it's just like, this is obviously a larger franchise thing, but I think the engineer is a weirdly weak group of characters. Like they're all kind of C minuses in a way. Like there's no one that's like, oh God, that's a terrible character. But there's no one that's really like, you have to have this guy as your like central piece for a series.
Well, but at the same time, I mean, maybe this is just a result of the prevalence of fans of the other series, though. Like, who gets excited about Trip? You know, I mean, you're probably right, but yeah, if you were to take a bunch of Star Trek fans,
yeah,
or what's the word? Not hardcore fans, but people who are familiar with the series,
sure,
and be like, yeah, I watched all the shows, I've seen all the shows, and have them do that draft. I don't know if Trip gets picked. I don't know if people get excited about Trip. You know,
who do you think gets picked in that situation?
I think
who's the casual fan favorite engineer character on Star Trek?
The casual fan favorite, I mean, Scotty has worked his way into like the cultural lexicon.
Yeah,
so he's probably the first person people look to.
But people know the Geordi eyes. People know the visor. That's like an iconic.
True.
Yeah.
But the Geordi eyes is not a turn of phrase.
Geordi Eyes is a great band name, though. I think I'm going to name my band.
Yeah,
Geordi's Eyes.
See the distance between you and I. So if not Scotty, I would say probably Geordi. I think after Geordi, I think the popular knowledge of Star Trek engineers dipped way off.
Yeah, I think the super hardcore fans would go for O'Brien, but I disagree with the hardcore
if you're
fandom
cool,
because I don't
if
really
you're cool,
like O'Brien.
You choose O'Brien.
Yeah.
The O'Brien is the kind of like hipster, slightly ironic choice.
Yes. Doesn't really feel like an engineer.
I do agree. No, he doesn't. I think if you're really going deep, Trip is probably a dark horse, but I can see why he wouldn't be most people's first choice. Let's put it that way. And again, I don't know if that's because the show clearly didn't become as ubiquitous as some of the other shows have.
I think I put a lot of stock in. I think that Trenier is the best actor in this group. He's like,
yes,
Billingsley,
definitely.
I think, is very good in his narrow range of what he was asked to do, but I don't think that. I think Trip was the character that the writers most. He's kind of similar to Riker to me in that they put him in the most situations where it almost feels like he's a kind of do anything character, and that he. I made a joke. I was saying about O'Brien doesn't feel like an engineer, but Trip really doesn't feel like an engineer a lot of the time because the only engineering he does is when he's in the warp place. Like when he's near the engine, you go, oh, he's the engineer. But his variety as a character is so across the board. I think that's his strength here. Is he not your winner for the breakout character of this show in relative terms?
I would say he is.
Okay.
Yeah. He's definitely he definitely had the closest thing to like an arc, I would say. Unfortunately, it was an arc that ended up in a pile of dog shit versus a pot of gold.
He had to connect the wires. He said, and I think that's where, like, I think that the reason that Braga killed off Trip is because it's some sort of self-loathing where Trip is the best character on the show and Braga just goes, fuck this guy. I hate this show. I'm going to kill him. And I was reading some interview and they asked him, why'd you kill Trip? He goes, I don't really know. I just wanted to. It's like, okay. So,
he gave the Fight Club answer where he's like, I just wanted to destroy something beautiful.
I think that's what it is. I think on a subconscious level, he saw Trip as the successful character of the show, and he's like, I don't like this show subconsciously, and I'm going to kill this character because I don't like him. That's my argument for him. Yeah. Now, so let's talk more generally about the top three, I guess, because I think Hoshi and Mayweather, We can talk. Mayweather's the worst Star Trek character of all time, right? Like the least developed, worst character who is a glorified background extra.
Yeah, of characters whose names are whose actors' names are in the opening credits, I would have to say yes.
Yeah, I think he easily is. Hoshi's a little bit
like
better.
How many episodes was Barclay in? Like 4?
Well, he's not main cast, but I would say he's a better.
I know, but still.
Yeah, he's a better character than Mayweather.
He was in 4 episodes and is leaps and bounds better character than Mayweather, who was on practically every episode of the show.
He's in 96 episodes or whatever. That's true. You know a lot about Barclay. Yeah.
Barclay never got hurt once.
He was tobogganing down those rock face without getting injured. Reed, kind of forgettable. It's really just Archer, T'Pol, and Trip, I guess. But just to get the bottom out of the way, I think that the bottom of this cast and crew is extremely weak through no fault of the. I say no fault of the actors, although once they started giving Anthony Montgomery stuff to do in the final season, I was like, oh, maybe they saw something here earlier that I was not picking up on because I don't think he's particularly good. But the rest of them, whatever. Thoughts on Archer? I guess we can stick to Archer and T'Pol, the top 2. T'Pol, the biggest letdown for me, I think. I was surprised by T'Pol.
Yeah, I was really excited about her as a character at the beginning of the show. I thought there was a lot of potential there for a really interesting story, but they never really committed to it in a way that felt natural and didn't involve weird space rock addiction. And I don't mean space rock as in like, progressive rock and roll. I
as
mean
in
like
Pink Floyd.
Yeah, like I'm not talking about like she wasn't addicted to King Crimson albums here. She was addicted to literal space rocks. Yeah, I think it was just she had so much upside to her character that really never got explored so much. And I can hear Rick Berman screaming in the back of my head about exploring T'Pol's upside, but I'm not going to let him have mic time.
I think T'Pol is the biggest letdown on the show. I'm surprised by how not consequential she is in the way that maybe it's just because of the way that Spock is set up in TOS, where you know that Spock is kind of like one of the prime heads of this 3-headed monster with Kirk, McCoy, and Spock, and you kind of expect that, well, if they're doing a Vulcan first officer, she's probably going to have some kind of Spock influence, like she's going to be a precursor to that or something. She's really not. She doesn't. T'Pol, like the difference there is that Spock was used to bring up interesting points of view within TOS episodes. As far as I can tell, T'Pol's purpose is to go, I don't believe that exists, and then get disproven about what exists. So she doesn't bring an interesting point of view to anything. She never gets the better of whoever the McCoy character would be on Enterprise. There's never a sense that she has a advantage and is in a better position to the humans in some ways, that she has while she might have a weakness in terms of like emotional development or whatever, she has something else that they don't have. T'Pol just felt to me like a character full of weaknesses that gradually eroded her into nothing until she became a relationship character with Trip. And even then, they didn't know what to do with that at that point. And her emotions coming through, they didn't know what to do with that. She just felt like a character who wore away to a nub by the end of the series.
Yeah, I mean, they had to find so many weird sort of external things to do with her that just didn't really feel natural for her progression. And I think the thing that is such a bummer about it is that they clearly understood where they should have gone with her, which is why they bring the space crack addiction in, making her more vulnerable to emotions and stuff. Like that seemed like it was gonna, or am I thinking the other way? They do like a hard pivot with that stuff, and I can't remember if it was away from that or towards it.
Hard
away from that?
into it, right? They kind of dropped the fact that she
right?
was suffering from this addiction. They never resolved that. It just went away by itself.
Yeah, and they kind of, well, I guess that kind of defeats my point then, because I thought it felt like they kind of knew that her journey should be to kind of be more empathetic and understanding of humans, but they never really explored that in a really meaningful way, and especially because she as a character is such a crucial element of the setup of the story, which is that the humans are going off into space. The Vulcans don't think they're ready. The humans don't really, they kind of think the Vulcans are full of shit. And so now the Vulcans have somebody on their ship kind of keeping tabs and like seeing stuff. So you have this natural antagonism built in that never really amounted to anything that was really satisfying.
Yeah, they kind of dropped that stuff. I'm surprised there was no more focus on like first season T'Pol as kind of a mole, like spy for the Vulcans. They didn't do. It's just maybe that's predictable.
You mean you think they dropped that story when in the second to last episode of the season, the antagonistic Vulcan gets up and slow claps after Archer gives the most rousing speech in the history of manned space travel.
I mean, I think in that regard, T'Pol just suffers from the show not understanding the Vulcans at all. Like if the Vulcans don't have a point of view, T'Pol can't have a point of view, because you either have to set T'Pol up as breaking away from Vulcan orthodoxy or representing it, in contrast to the crew. Yeah. And they can't do either, because they don't know what the Vulcans are in this series.
And then later you can do a story where you have those two forces actively butting heads with each other and find a way to essentially keep her out of it and make Archer the central person in the middle.
I think that's pretty much it for the general series. Do you have I can go first if you want. My general takeaway from Enterprise is just that it is it's clearly the end of this franchise's 90s run into the 2000s. Like the Nemesis and the Star Trek Generations, Next Generation movies didn't help, but we've yet to get into Voyager. But Enterprise to me just felt like it was a show that existed just because they needed to have a Star Trek show out there. I don't feel that anyone was interested in this. I don't think that anyone really cared. I think that the actors are at the whim of the production and writer staff at that point. I don't think the writers really cared. I think that Braga, like a lot of people complain about Berman and Braga saying that they killed Star Trek. And I before watching this series, I was always kind of like, it's not just two guys. Like it's got the whole weight of the franchise weighing on it and stuff. I don't think that they're entirely responsible, but I think that their disinterest poisoned this series. I think that with showrunners who were like legitimately full of energy and ready to do something new at the start, I think the series would have been fundamentally different than what it turned into. I just don't, from that oral history and just watching what this show was, this show felt to me like just catching paychecks from Braga. Yeah. So I do hold it against them for a little bit.
I would be interested to know how much different it could actively have been. Excuse me. Because I think about Ronald Moore's story about Voyager, where he had a much different, darker, newer idea that Voyager would be, and then they were kind of like, that's cool and everything, but what if we just put him on the TNG sets and put the TNG shirts on him and we just go with that way? It's like, yeah, okay, sure, I guess. But I think the difference there is that Enterprise existing at all means that they realized they had to do something different and new and couldn't just keep doing the same 90s hangover stuff. But yeah, I think it could have benefited quite a bit from people who were not burned out on doing 15 years of Star Trek.
That's a lot of Star Trek. to write.
It's a lot of Star Trek.
It's a lot of Star Trek to write. I don't even really blame them. I don't blame them for the quality, because after 15 years they'd be like, I can't write another goddamn script of this series at all. What I blame them for is continuing it, which to me is just a paycheck at that point, where there's no, you can't have desire to do this. Braga's gone through 3 Star Trek series by this point. Like that's a lot of Star Trek to get through.
If it were me, if I had gotten to the end of, if I was like one of the head writers or whatever of TNG, and I got to the 7th season of TNG and they were like, oh, by the way, you have to write a movie that ties together your series and the classics series, which has its own diehard fan base and expectations, while you are also trying to do an entire season of television.
Yeah.
After I did that, I would have been like, I'm going to take a break for the rest of my life from Star Trek, I think.
It's a lot of Star Trek. So that's it. Star Trek Enterprise is done. We'll read some Patron comments. Clay, it's hard to break. It's much like Brandon Braga writing a Star Trek script. It's hard to break from tradition. I was going to pepper in comments the whole way through, and I completely didn't because of podcasting muscle memory, but we can get to it now, I guess. But first, thank you for joining us on our journey through Enterprise. Patreon.com/ThePensky File is the best way to support the show. If you're so interested in supporting us, Patreon.com/ThePensky File. A couple dollars a month, you get extra podcasts, extra content, behind the scenes stuff, through the content consumption. We talk about what we're watching outside of stuff that we're podcasting about. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's a good deal.
Those things don't exist anymore, Wes. We only consume so we can process and put out.
It's true. I certainly feel that way sometimes. Very sad. Anyway, Patreon.com/ThePensky File. And as always, we give a shout out to our big supporters there, the Captain tier. Special thank you to a lot of these people who have been here I'm going to wax nostalgic since the start here, Clay. A lot of these names, people have been here forever, joining us on this interminable journey through Star Trek, which we're going to get into after this. We'll talk about what's going next.
And so many of them wanting to just do it all over again, which I'm thrilled about. Can't wait.
No, it's I always I do like this franchise. Like, it is funny. Like I think we almost have an entire podcast in ourselves about the difference between Discovery and Enterprise, right? Where I find Discovery like viscerally upsetting to me. I as a thing of watching it, I hate it as I'm watching it, which is why we don't podcast about it. But I never hated Enterprise in the way that I think Discovery is a bad show. But Discovery also didn't have so many. How many episodes of Discovery have there been? 40 to this point? 50? Something like that, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
So it's like we did double the amount of Enterprise episodes. It just wears on you a little bit differently, but it is different shades, I guess. Anyway, the patrons who've been here for a very long time support the show. Samuel Custer, Tarek Latif, Andrew Charlock, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Christian Pouch, Matthew Ross, Brendan Howells, Matthew Cutler, Nick Sergi, Michael Pond, Grim Santos, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Vol 13 Hero, Darth Moss, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elledge, Stephen Minton, HH28, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jake123, Point Extra G, Patrick Seba, Dave Davies, Nick the Rat, Captain Brazen, Eric Sanchuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Grappa, John Zorn, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardue, Retail, Tom Hickey, Diz Brutta, Jose Hunter's EWNF Remixes, Ed Mark Starr, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die. Next page, Chris McLaughlin, Rage for the Machine. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the show. Thank you to all the patrons who have made Voyager possible for us now. So we'll do the patron thoughts, Clay. We'll get through these. Cerulio says, series wrap up. This show is almost a complete missed opportunity, and I often think about how it could have been made better by being more like Deep Space Nine, tethered to a narrow spot in space by low warp speeds instead of a station assignment. It should have primarily focused on the run-up to the Earth-Romulan War and the founding of the Federation without time travel and Xindi nonsense. I also wish they had moved away from the 1 year, 1 season and had each season cover 2 or 3 years with months of low warp travel conveyed via the log dates. Then they could have had 2 to 5 episode lore-building story arcs where they visited a planet every few months, bottle episodes where things happen as they're traveling from one place to another, and background politics could mature lore at a more realistic rate. It is inherently harder to make prequels captivate an audience because you already know subsequent events, but the fourth season feels like it's the first time they actually tried, and the first season had started the series with the fourth season's prequel mindset. The show could have blossomed into something very much fun to watch. I like his idea about taking a long time to get to different planets. I think that's kind of a neat thing. They don't really broach that here. The Warp 5 thing is mostly... What is that? Just a canon reference? They can't go super fast?
Yeah, like warp 1 through 9 or whatever the limit is may as well be like, parsecs in Star Wars or something, even though I know that's a distance or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, it means nothing. Like, it's their ship can't go faster than warp 5. Okay, so what? That doesn't really factor into anything because you're still flying to fucking Ryza, which is somewhere that the Galaxy class Enterprise D that can go like warp 10 or whatever can get to. Is Ryza like just outside the solar system or something? Yeah. It's, you know what I mean? It's like you're still going to these places. They went to fucking Kronos. Yep. Where is Kronos? How long does it take to get to Kronos?
They got there quick, if I'm remembering the pilot. They got there in like 7 hours or something. It was ridiculously fast how quickly they got to Kronos. Yeah, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, like the speeds mean nothing. So to make it mean something would have been an interesting take. It would have been interesting it would have been more interesting than say we don't have a tractor beam, all we have is a grappling hook.
Use the grappler.
It's that kind of change, but it's a change that feels like it has some impact on what they can and can't do.
It's the disinterest of this. There's a lot, as Cerulio's saying, there's a lot of ways they could have approached this early. And who knows how much of this is the studio saying, no, you have to do it traditionally. But it is like, what if this series existed in multi-episode arcs that were 2 to 3 episodes between getting to the next planet? Because that's how long they have to move. And I think it would have benefited we've trashed the show, but what this show did well is very small moments. That's where the show existed, kind of. And they never really embraced that or got away with it to an extent that I would want, but that's what the show could have done. If this was about the drama as you're waiting to get to the fireworks factory, I think there's a series in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cerulio. Wait a minute. What the hell's going on? Thomas Darnell says, Enterprise has a lot of problems, but what I want out of my trek is to go somewhere new and explore the planet/alien/anomaly of the week, pose our philosophical question of the week, have a little adventure, and then check back next week. I don't like soap opera serialization, but Enterprise occasionally came through for me. You can guess DS9 was not my favorite. All I wanted from this series was to get a glimpse of the local galaxy before TOS, maybe visit some of the iconic things that never get explored after that series, and it tended to happen. Season 3 was a disaster, and the Temporal Cold War was a catastrophe, but they told small stories well enough to my taste, and in Trek trappings that I like. For me, TOS is better than TNG, which is better than Voyager, which is better than Enterprise, which is better than DS9.
Oh, wow.
Which is a tremendous thing to write on the internet because I can print screen that and post it, and people will say, "Wow, look at that." DS9 being being at the end of that,
they sure will.
A bold choice.
They will sure will say, "Hey, look at that."
That's all I can hope for this podcast. People say, "Hey, look at that thing." Thank you, Thomas. Much appreciated. He brings up serialization. I don't like soap opera serialization, but Enterprise occasionally came through to me. It seems that he's criticizing Enterprise for having soap opera serialization. Would you have wanted, just quick, would you have wanted more or less serialization out of Enterprise? And define what I mean by that word if you need to take a definition for yourself.
Honestly, I don't know. Because I feel like the show itself was so schizophrenic with that stuff that it didn't even super really know how it wanted to structure itself. Because it went from episodic to what if we did one long season about one long story arc to what if we did a bunch of short story arcs. Yeah. So they clearly weren't themselves sure what the right approach was. I think for me, I think that much like the first comment said, if there had been a larger setting story that everything sort of happened with that in the backdrop, I think that would have been more satisfying to me than straight serialization or straight episodic. Every week things reset.
Yeah, I don't think this show understood its characters well enough to do serialization. I think shows that serialize really well have to have strong character work at the basis of it, because otherwise it doesn't. Yeah. The serialization doesn't matter really.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think this show needed to be more serialized. Actually, I think that it. I don't think it had to. I think that this had actually the right amount of serialization in a 90s or post-90s Star Trek to me. They didn't do it well, but I thought that it was effective enough.
Well, what's interesting about that conversation though is like it's one of the difficulties of making a new Star Trek show, because I think everybody likes different things, right? So if you did a show that was explicitly episodic, you're going to have people who would rather have, my favorite Star Trek is Deep Space Nine, where it's all serialized and things more run together. And you get vice versa. You need a period like now where they just make 15 shows and they just do them all differently.
All the things.
That's why I have no problem in saying that I hope Strange New World is an episodic show and not just another Discovery. It's going to be. It's going to
be the same thing. Don't give yourself. I've never read a quote from Akiva Goldsman that like after the season aired, I go, he was clearly working on this show. His quotes are always insane. They're like these completely off the mark takes on what's going on. Matt Ross says, what started out as a hopeful series seemed to be adrift without anything but rehashed ideas, which really became apparent in Season 2. The change up with the Xindi arc in Season 3, although a bit welcome, should have gone the Earth-Romulan War that leads to the Federation's founding instead of the weird campiness that bled into Season 4. At Season 4, there was a lot of good ideas, which should probably have been the Season 2 of the show, but they simply ran out of time. A lot of missteps from the beginning by not having the name Star Trek in the title, that damn theme song, the casting of Archer as a naive Boy Scout, the short shrift of Mayweather, jerky emotional Vulcans, among other things, make this the weakest of the series before the newer Trek stories. The series overall would get a solid meh, neither great nor truly terrible. A 2.7 to 3 out of 5 overall. Vault 13 Nero.
Yeah, pretty much.
I thought Enterprise was hitting its stride in Season 2, as crazy as that may sound. Season 3's long arc doomed the show, even if it was mostly okay. I still think Dear Doctor and Similitude are Star Trek at its best, but when I look back fondly on Enterprise, I think of Reed and Mayweather making a snowman on a comet, and it makes me smile. The series was its best with the little in-between moments. Still a better prequel series than Discovery, though.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
What's your favorite Enterprise episode? Can you remember what your favorite? Can you? Do you want me to give you a couple that you thought were really good?
The series finale. The series finale.
The series finale is excellent. You like Similitude. You liked Cogenitor.
Which one was Similitude?
Similitude is the clone of Trip. Sim.
Right. That was a good one. I like that.
Cogenitor was the one where Trip, again, the genderless person, right? Yep. The third gender. That's that episode. And then your other three, your third 5 out of 5 is Dear Doctor from Season 1. Those are the 3 5s you gave to Enterprise.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is.
Other episodes we talk about all the time. Breaking the Ice, which is the one, the snowman on the comet. We always reference that one as kind of a neat episode.
Yeah.
I liked Unexpected. Judgment, the Klingon trial. I remember that one with Archer. Regeneration, the one with the Borg. Proving Ground, I don't remember what that is. Damage in the Forgotten. We liked those two. And then Cold Station 12, In a Mirror Darkly, and Observer Effect. Those are the top episodes from us.
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's the best, but I feel like Breaking the Ice might be my favorite one.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah, and it's like
here's another one.
Like that was
sorry, the Dead Stop episode. That was the one where they find that automated space station and it like steals people and eats their brains to become the I like that one too. That's kind of a neat Enterprise episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep thinking Breaking the Ice just because it seems like that one held the potential for the show in it.
Did.
That it never quite really tapped into again.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't know if it's due to watching so many of these so quickly, my own deteriorating brain, or just the fact that it says something about the show that I can't really point to an episode that really stood out to me and go like, yeah, no, that was my favorite episode. I really like Dear Doctor. Quite a bit.
I was looking at the other Trek series we did, and I think it is something about this show. I was looking at other shows, and I have a better memory recall of those episodes than I do for Enterprise. I feel Enterprise episodes kind of blend together. Like Similitude and Cogenitor, I would probably get those episodes mixed up if they were telling me it's the one that there's a clone or whatever. So is that Cogenitor or is that the other one? Trips in both of them. There's probably like a Naked to Paul in both of them. I'll save my top 5. I'll make a video of it, a standalone. But I do think that here's a question: do you regret giving 5s to any of these Enterprise episodes?
I have no fucking clue. I have no idea. No, because I like to operate inside the idea of a 5 is a 5 for the series more than it is a 5 for the franchise. Sure. Or the rating is a rating for the series more than it is for a rating for the franchise.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't regret rating them too high or too low. Because hopefully I was doing so within what I thought of the series as a whole and not too many outlying factors.
Yeah. I look at it as I'm just glad I didn't give anything a 5 because I don't think anything from Enterprise would fit into a top 50 of Star Trek. Like, you got a lot of episodes.
You gave no 5s?
No 5s.
You gave no 5s across the 98 episodes? Wow.
I respect the process that we got going here. I'm not just gonna give out a 5 because I'm bored. I haven't said the word in a long time. No, I didn't give any 5s. But I don't think
you're like the teacher. You're like the teacher who's like, I don't give out A+. No one ever has gotten an A+.
I don't grade on a curve. I'm not gonna lift you up. You can get the grade. No, I'm not going to do it, but I wonder if I started making a list of Star Trek episodes, I wonder how long it would take before I got to an Enterprise one. And I think it would be a ways down the line of it. All right.
Yeah.
What did I do? I read comments. There's still a comment. We'll wrap these up. Norman Buchwald says, this is definitely the least liked of the live Star Trek series for me. Mark from Enchantment of Eternity said it best. Why, I guess I always had a problem. The characters are too bland. They tried to make it a right stuff type series, and mostly it failed. Archer is my least liked captain. Still, the last third of Season 3 and Season 4 showed what a prequel can do, and that potential sometimes was more than promise. Anyway, be prepared as you move from one series with potential to be frustrated with another with Voyager. The only difference, Voyager had a better set of characters, my opinion, of course. I just wish Mayweather had at least gotten some love from the writers, as well as Hoshi. Thank you, Norman. Yarpy says, the huge mistake they did with
hold on a second. Hold on. He wishes that Mayweather got some love from Hoshi?
No, that they both had gotten some writerly love, but it wouldn't hurt to give each other a little bit of loving, too. You're only going to Warp 5. It takes you a long time to get places.
Yeah, sure does.
Yarpy says, the huge mistake they did with the show was to set it many years before the Romulan War and 10 years before the founding of the Federation. This is what I would have done with 2020 hindsight. Start the show with a miniseries like they did with Battlestar Galactica and set the table for the Romulan War, have it start in the first season and last for a few seasons at least, and then have the founding of the Federation in the first year of the Federation, trying to hold it together, etc. Might require some time compression, depending on how long the war would be. I'm not just about him. He brings up the Romulan War. A few people have brought up the Romulan War.
I didn't even realize that was a thing, honestly. And
Yeah.
that people were mentioning that. I was like, yeah, no, that seems like a natural place to do it. I don't know why they didn't do that.
Yeah, the Romulan War is obviously after this, at the start of the Federation and stuff. The only thing that I would say about the Romulan War is that, like, I understand why people would want that as a kind of inciting incident, and that would be a good backdrop. I think that the problem there is that the assumption people are making is that also the writing just is better. Like, I think that this show, if this show as it was had started during the Romulan War, I think the Romulan War would have been very boring, really. You know,
Sure.
like, that's my. Yeah. I think the problem goes more fundamental than just the time that they selected as the start of it. But I understand what people mean about wanting something exciting going on in the background.
You know what I kind of wish they had done is, I think this show would have been perfect for a season to season time jump. I don't mean like sci-fi
like
time
2
jump.
years
I mean
or something
like,
in between seasons.
Yeah, or even more, like 5 or something. You know, just
well, we saw that in the finale, and apparently nothing changes, Clay. Like 10 years go by.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's the problem. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they could have easily gone like, all right, we're in our backs against the wall a little bit here. We're kind of stale. What do we do? Let's jump forward 5 years and kind of reset everything. We can tweak these characters. Maybe things have changed about them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that could have been a good way to kind of reset everything.
It's a neat way to get a lot of history out of the way too, quickly. You know.
Yeah. If Brandon Braga hadn't fucking railroaded them by sending them to goddamn World War II, maybe they could have done it between seasons 3 and 4. The other thing I was going to say is, does this overlap with BSG at all? Were those airing at the same time at all?
I think so. Yeah.
That is a huge, like, comparing those two shows to the being on at the same time is like you can so clearly see where Star Trek is just behind the times.
Yes, you can.
And I'm not saying it needs to be BSG, because Battlestar Galactica, I think, much like Rage Against the Machine did for music, Battlestar Galactica might have done more damage than good for sci-fi television, because it was the first kind of darker, more adult take on a Star Trek type show, which has now disseminated, trickled down into permeated, into all of like, you don't have Discovery without Battlestar Galactica. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But it is a really interesting contrast to see those two shows were both on at the same time.
It is. It is definitely that's the schism there. And I think in some ways, if I had been watching Enterprise in real time, I think it might have been more depressing, really. Like I still watching Enterprise 20 years later, I still kind of just associated with the 90s era of this. Like it doesn't feel connected to a real year. But if I was watching this live as it came out, and then my other show I was watching was Battlestar, I'd be like, wow, Enterprise is just terrible. Like, what is Enterprise even doing up here at this point? Now it just seems charming and how weak it is. But Grappa John Zorn says,
you're telling me on the Sci-Fi Channel they got full side boob and we have to do tank tops in the shower? What are we doing here?
Ron Moore, I made you, motherfucker. TNG, look at you.
All of that's my idea. All of those cleavage shots are my idea, and you know it, you son of a bitch.
He stole Rick's idea of all characters are exactly the same and turned them into the Cylons. It's like, I told you. No characterization. Grappa John Zorn says, I would have cast Vaughn Armstrong as Archer. Armstrong is Admiral Forrest. I enjoy Enterprise more each time I rewatch it. Season 4, in spite of its isn't he? That is Vaughn Armstrong, right? I'm not thinking of...
yes, it is. Yeah.
I enjoy Enterprise more each time I watch it. Season 4, in spite of its flaws, creates a nice bookend with the original series. The best episodes are those in which they invested time in the lesser characters. Darth Mosk.
I was just going to say, the casting of Archer seems to be still the biggest initial misstep with the show. And like, it's tough though, because like, if you look back on the other captains, they're all well-respected actors, but they're not actors who are like known quantities.
Yeah. Certainly at the time.
Yeah. Casting Scott Bakula as Jonathan Archer is like casting Ben Affleck as Batman after you cast Christian Bale as Batman.
It's true.
You know?
It is the first backwards casting, isn't it? Where it's like it's based more on his acting credential. Well, his name, I guess, is the driver behind casting him in a way that Stewart, Avery Brooks, and Kate Mulgrew were not.
Yeah. Like I think Sonequa Martin Green is a lot more in the tradition of how they usually cast leads of these shows than Bakula is.
I mean, that's the better way, right? It's just like I wonder if there's a kind of cleverness in casting Bakula because he's not super name, but he kind of is at the same time.
He's a nerd name. Like the people who are watching Enterprise are the same people who are watching Quantum Leap, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
That in and of itself is fan service, I would say.
Yeah. It isn't, it's one more thing into just there's no Star Trek in the title. It's got a theme song and Scott Bakula is the lead of this.
Right, yeah.
Which hurt Archer more, Bakula or the writing of Archer?
I'm going to say Bakula.
Yeah.
Because I think an actor with more dynamic range could have made more of that stuff work in ways that he just couldn't really get there with it.
What's Archer's defining trait?
His Julius Caesar haircut.
I was looking at old pictures of him. His hair has gone some tremendous transformation over 4 years, but it's always goofy how everyone's haircut looks the first season of their TV show. It's a very funny thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that is. How would I describe Archer? I honestly don't know how you describe Archer. Does he have a characteristic? What's his trait? I feel like this is what just piles into I don't believe that this guy is some sort of historical figure that people would read about. There's just nothing to him. I don't know. It's strange.
I would say he's fairly stubborn. Like he kind of, once he sets his mind to something, that tends to be what he does until the plot requires him to change his mind at the last minute.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say he's closed-minded, really. Like he's not stubborn in a way that makes it an interesting character trait, you know? He's just kind of mildly stubborn about things. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not great. If we've watched 98 episodes of this show and we can't describe the main character of it.
Well, it's funny because I can, for someone like Reed,
Wars test, right?
Reed I can define. Reed is kind of the stick in the mud, like rules are rules character. That's what Reed is supposed to be. Trip is the shucks, kind of like try anything, like everybody's friend character in the way that Riker is. Mayweather flies the ship. It's Phlox is, the happy-go-lucky Denobulan who likes to experience things. Like that's kind of written. Archer's strangely undefined. And I wonder if, as what you're saying, is that as an actor, Bakula didn't bring anything to the writers that they were like, this is the way that Archer is supposed to be. Because
he didn't have a trombone.
He didn't.
I mean that metaphorically. Like there's usually you work with an actor long enough, you figure out what they're really good at, and you can play into their strengths. And he knows how to play the trombone. Yeah, sure, write it into an episode.
Yeah.
Bakula doesn't really have a trombone. It seems like he never really elevated the material, and the material never really elevated him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking about the different characters, is there the hilarious thing about Mayweather is how much backstory he has that's actually fairly interesting, that was clearly written to cover up for the fact that he as a character is painfully boring. Like his whole backstory about like growing up on the pirate ship and all that kind of shit, being a boomer and all that. Yeah. Like that stuff is fairly interesting. Like he's the only one in the first season who really gets that sort of this is where I came from. It's how different it is, and blah 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 blah. But it never plays into him as a character. It's just lip service.
The boomer,
except for that one episode where he goes back home.
Yeah, meets his freighter family.
Yeah,
the boomer thing is interesting because it's such a kick the can down the road. It's like an analog to kick the can down the road. They come up with this idea of boomers, which is that in this universe, people who are born in space are seen differently. So they're seen so differently, they're given a nickname as to like represent them, boomers.
Mm-hmm.
But so when you're writing the Bible of the show, you're like, oh, that's great. Mayweather's a boomer. Like he's totally different. All the other characters have a name for him. He's called a boomer. They must have some sort of universal opinion about these people. He's a son of a freighter captain, didn't grow up in Starfleet. He knows the frontier in a way that none of the other characters do. And then you you actually start writing the series, and there's no way to tie in what a boomer is in any way. It's like, who cares what this is? No one seems to care. I think it was on I was on that other Computer Zoom podcast, and I was just spitballing, but I was thinking about how the boomer class could have been an example of where Star Trek Enterprise tried to develop something where by casting a black actor in the role, you can decouple actual racism from the black and white thing and turn it into a kind of like racist against boomer type. There's some sort of like human mentality that people born in space are kind of a lesser thing. And by having a black actor play it, it becomes this easy analog metaphor for racism or something. But they never get into it. And it's just like, why is he called a boomer? Why do they call them these things if no one seems to care? And that's I don't know. And sad.
You would think he and Reed would be a really natural counterpoint for each other, because you've got Mayweather, who grew up in space and has been all over the place experiencing stuff on the freighter ship, and Reed, who is a military family kid who probably has been at West Point or whatever his whole life.
Family came from the Navy. The starships are a jump for him. They're earthbound to the core.
Yeah, he's got a military or seafaring or spacefaring pedigree, but he's never actually left Earth.
Yeah.
Versus this kid who's just a kid who ended up in Starfleet, who has all this experience. Like I think there's some interesting stuff you could get into there, but they never had the time to do it. Also, I still maintain that Mayweather should have been the future guy, the Daniels character.
We haven't talked about I forget Daniels. Darth Moss says, on the whole, this rewatch almost ruined the show for me. Enterprise benefits from syndication and just catching random episodes on the Sci-Fi Network back in the day, and it greatly enhances their appeal. The serialized stories are the most interesting, and it's where the show shines best, but a lack of leadership from behind the scenes, as well as the captain's chair, looking at you, Archer, just couldn't save it. I'm glad Enterprise exists for its best episodes, but it never achieves the more than the sum of its parts that DS9 manages to capture. Prequels suck. Let's get to the Delta Quadrant. Thank you, Darth Mosk. Rayo says, I feel the comparison of Enterprise to Red Dead Redemption 2 is apt. Very clearly, Red Dead Redemption 2 had a prequel story it wanted to tell and was very clearly passionate about the setting, while Enterprise floundered for direction and had very little to say once it found that direction. Enterprise had the very strange demographic issue of writing stories with morals that would only teach anything to a 7-year-old, but filling the show with so much smut that 7-year-olds wouldn't be able to watch it. The one advantage Season 4 of Enterprise has is that it's willing to reference and incorporate elements of the original series, something that was outright outlawed by Roddenberry back when he was alive working on TNG, to the point that it's a minor miracle that Bones was on Encounter at Farpoint. Looking back at TNG, it's almost comical how many one-off forgettable human races there are in the Federation, while the original founding members were nowhere to be seen, the result of Gene's dictates. Even if the scripts fleshing out the Vulcans, Tellarites, and Andorians weren't the best, at least it was something Enterprise was able to do over the other shows. TOS is better than TNG, which is better than DS9, which is better than Voyager, which is better than Enterprise.
A lot of TOS fans here, huh?
A lot of TOS fans.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
There's anything wrong with that?
It's a choice. What would Yeah, I don't think I could ever consider myself a TOS fan, really. It's hard to say.
I mean I don't know how I would classify myself at all, honestly. Like, I don't know. I know this is kind of like a non-answer, but I would classify myself more as a fan of the franchise than of any one specific show.
Yeah.
That being said, I like probably, I mean, I've said this before, but like my Star Trek is the Star Trek movies, like the TOS movies.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I would probably put at the top of, but even there, it's like 3 of them, you know, it's not even like all of them.
Not
It's,
all 12.
No, it's but like, you know, I would probably put the TOS movies is what I think of when I think of Star Trek, followed very closely by TNG.
Yeah, that's fair. The series or the movies?
The series.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I would probably put I don't know if I would say TOS is better. I don't know. It's tough. That's the thing. I can't, it's really tough for me to quantify them against each other.
It's one of these
because
go ahead.
I don't think that I prefer to watch. I can tell you that I prefer to watch all of the other ones we've seen so far over Enterprise. That I can tell you.
Clay's not a fan of this franchise, but if you were, he wouldn't be a fan of Enterprise.
But you know what I mean? Where it's like I like Deep Space Nine a lot, but I like TNG a lot as well. Yeah. I don't know if I like one of them more. I have more nostalgic attachment to TNG, you know, that kind of thing. So it's tough for me to really. I guess if I'm being completely honest, I would put TNG at the top, because if I'm going to just sit down and put on an episode of Star Trek, I'm probably going to do TNG.
Yeah, it's one of those. The experiment I would run that's completely implausible, but it's what I would do, is that I would give you some sort of streaming. The only streaming channel you can watch is like an all Star Trek randomizer stream, and I would tabulate what you skipped. Like, you were allowed to skip episodes, right? And it'd be like, okay, Clay clearly likes TNG and he hates Enterprise because he's never watched an Enterprise episode. I think that's the only way to really judge that kind of stuff, and is whatever way you can.
The thing, okay, even that is not even fair, because like, it could be the best episode of Enterprise. As soon as it hits that theme song, I'm hitting skip. I don't even care what the episode is.
I think that's what it is, though, right? That's like
and their cold opens are so bad.
Yeah.
Like, if it was just came down to, I have to make a snap decision based off the cold open and the theme song, am I going to watch this? My answer is no, 100% of the time. Unless that cold open ends with fucking William Riker ending a hologram, a holodeck program, and walking into frame. Then I'm watching the episode.
Yeah, I guess the way that I'd have to refine that is that you're forced to watch an episode, right? But you have one skip. So your choice is, do I watch this episode, or do I randomly select another episode and I'm forced to watch it? You know what I mean? So if that were the case, if I were running this experiment, I would settle comfortably on TNG quite a bit. If I got a TNG episode, I'd have to really think about whether or not this is a bad TNG episode that I want to skip. TOS is probably 25-75 for me. There's one quarter of the time I go, this is a good episode, I'll watch this one. The rest of them will be like, I'm taking the random chance and seeing what happens here. DS9 is probably slightly less than TNG, but Enterprise, I'm skipping. If I get an Enterprise episode, I will hit the skip and see what else am I going to get out of this. Kyle Barrett says, Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek series, unparalleled in quality and depth, but of the more traditional exploratory ship shows, Enterprise is my favorite, with a U. There are no stuffy officers or know-it-all perspectives, but rather the most fallible, uncertain crew of the franchise. Whether it's First Contact, trying to save Earth, or attempting interstellar diplomacy, the crew of the NX-01 are enjoyably out of their element, struggling with their personal lives, incredibly horny, and almost guaranteed to fuck everything up. It's a shame then, or maybe poetically appropriate, that the writers are similar to their characters in this respect, governed by showrunners long past caring, and the show occupying the television hinterland between anthology and serialized in a shifting landscape. Mistakes are made, but I find the show genuinely charming from its strengths to its flaws. I love the aesthetic. Clay, do you have something to say about that? And if I had to, I just spend more time watching a crew, this is the one I choose because of all the shows I encountered on my travels. This was the most human.
I mean, all I can say is that makes perfect sense because he's from England, which is just flat gray all the time. So it tracks.
It's a stirring defensive enterprise. I disagree with it, I think.
Well, what's funny is his description of the show sounds fantastic.
Sounds great. Yeah, sounds like a good show.
Yeah, I don't know if the show itself lives up to that for me, but
and I think I know he's just making a joke here about the most human thing, but like I think the fundamental flaw with this argument is that DS9 has the most human crew. You know?
You mean Enterprise?
Is it DS9?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I see what you're saying.
DS9 has not literally human, but DS9 has the most, in the context of that Kirk quote, human crew out of everything.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And the counter to Cal's point is that I think Enterprise's crew is remarkably unhuman in the sense that they're not sophisticated and interesting enough to be captivating.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we've excoriated him, I'll move on to the final comment. Jonathan J.K. Morris says, series wrap up. Hindsight is, of course, 2020, but considering the cost of Enterprise's Season 4 compared to STD now, those micromanaging it, less Moonvest is one, really made it a financial, creative, and cultural mistake. For all of Enterprise's faults, the talent still shines higher than what other people are watching now. Still stars higher out of 5 higher than you can give Star Trek Discovery. We'll go out with a burn of Star Trek Discovery. Not the burn, just a burn. Thank you, Jonathan Morris. Thank you, everybody, for leaving your comments about Enterprise. We're done with it. We can't really rate it. We're just at the end. It's been a long road getting from here to there. We made that joke. There it goes. It's out the door. I did it at the end.
If you're gonna say it right.
I'll say it, and you'll hit your skip button on your remote, and
I will every time.
I don't have any final thoughts about this one. We're done. It's always a little bit not sad. It's always a little bit like emotionally interesting to finish one of these series because we spend so long watching them that now it's no longer a part of my day to day. But that's fine. Enterprise is the show that I will not rewatch.
If we are, I don't know if you want to talk about what's happening next, but if we are doing Picard before Voyager, is that the plan?
It's up in the air. So there are a lot of options because we're recording this on the day that the new CBS lineup for this year came out. So we know the schedule for Picard, Strange New Worlds, and the next Discovery season. So there's a lot. So go with what you're saying, but what you're saying is one of many options we have at this point.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is if we are in fact putting a little buffer time between this show and Voyager.
2 mega series. Take a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, I am happy to do that because I think it'll be a nice palate cleanse to go to something more modern before jumping back. Because getting into such another long series where you're starting
right at the start,
starting at the bottom. Nice SD special effects from the late 90s. Just looking great.
Terrible haircuts in season 1.
Yeah, questionable writing. It's all going to be there.
People made a good idea about Voyager might be a good series to end every season with another series. To in between seasons of Voyagers, you do something else, like you do a Picard or Strange New Worlds in between them.
I see. Okay.
I can see that being a good example. I think Voyager would benefit from that, especially because it's so long.
Is it that bad that you need a full season break between?
No, it's just show? I like Voyager, sort of. I have not seen a lot of Voyager, but I I probably will enjoy Voyager more than Enterprise, but I think that it's the wear and tear of Voyager is similar to Enterprise. So I think breaking it up, I think breaking up Enterprise would have been a good idea too, if we had the option to do a season in between them and then go back to it. But I don't think Voyager is all that bad. And the first season is super short, which is nice about Voyager. So we have that to look forward to. But we'll see. We'll hammer all this out. The downside is that if we start skipping or we do Picard or something, we lose our backlog, which is a tragedy because we have to wait for Picard to come out.
Oh, right. Right.
So maybe we just record Voyagers and then go into the Picard. We'll see. This is all behind the scenes stuff we'll talk about. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting us on patreon.com/thepensky file. We're done with Star Trek Enterprise. Another one bites the dust. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we're done? We're months in the future. What is this? This is like February 17th, so I don't know what you want to go from there.
If this is in February, keep listening to the Rotten Horror Picture Show. In February on Patreon, we will be doing, I don't even know what we're doing. We're doing a Stephen King movie.
You just did It
has
in
not
January.
been decided at this point. Yeah, we did It Part 2 in January, and in February, I don't know, Christine, Silver Bullet, something like that. A ringing sales job I'm doing here. But yeah, if you want to follow Amanda and I as we cover the lesser-known Stephen King adaptations on this year, you can do so on our the Pensky File Patreon.
There you go. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying Star Trek Enterprise with us. We're done. We'll be back with something, be it Picard, Voyager, or something in between. We got a lot of time to think about it. I'll put a Patreon poll up too, so people can vote and show us what they think. Thanks, everybody, for listening. See you later.